All right, so we'll go ahead and finish up this particular PowerPoint on monopolies, and we will discuss the efficiency of monopolies. This was a part of our little true-false quiz when we started this topic. Are monopolies efficient? We're going to see that they are not necessarily efficient, and we'll look at both of our efficiencies and we'll see an example of what we're talking about. So when we're talking about the actual inefficiency of a monopoly, there's a few reasons that they are not considered inefficient. The first one is that generally they charge a higher price. All right, they're going to charge a higher price than if the free market produced, because there's no competition. There's no need for them to charge a lower price. They are price makers. The second thing is they don't produce enough. They're not allocatively efficient. So they don't produce enough of the product that society wants. Like we would all like more diamonds from De Beers, but they don't produce enough. They cause artificial scarcity, which drives up the price of their product, and so on and so forth. And then three, they produce at higher cost. All right. So for these reasons, we can say that they aren't efficient. We're going to look at it on the graph here in just a second. But the biggest thing is they don't produce what society wants, and they don't produce it at their lowest cost. So anyway, if we look at monopolies versus perfect competition, right? We all remember that this is our consumer surplus. We all remember that this is our producer surplus, and that because equilibrium has set the price and quantity in this particular graph, consumer and producer surplus is being maximized. And notice that is with a demand curve, and we haven't seen marginal revenue yet. All right, so these are both maximized. If we add our monopoly gang sign, the marginal revenue curve, we'll notice something that happens here. Back here, this is our equilibrium, right? This is where we're going to produce. Once we add in the new marginal revenue curve, we know that we produce where MR equals MC, and we're going to produce here. So society wants this quantity. Monopolies produce at this quantity. All right. Society wants this price. Monopolies sell at this price. Okay. And so right away we see they charge a higher price. They produce less than what society wants. And so so at MR equals MC, monopolists will produce less and charge a higher price. All right. So if we plugged in now consumer surplus and producer surplus for a monopoly, remember we're at a price all the way up to the demand curve for consumer surplus. We notice that we lose this area that was here. And if you think about it, this should just make sense that now the producer surplus will take up that area because the producer is the monopoly. They're going to make more money. They're going to have more surplus. However, they're missing this quantity of sales that's right here, and this is when the monopoly would experience deadweight loss. Okay, so monopolies underproduce, they overcharge. This decreases consumer surplus and increases producer surplus. All right, one more quick time. We are at equilibrium. Consumer and producer surplus is maximized. Right? Everything's good. Now, the marginal revenue curve for a monopoly, we produce at a different quantity. They charge a higher price. Right? This now reduces the consumer surplus, increases a producer surplus, and they're now experiencing deadweight loss. Therefore, we know that they are allocatively inefficient, and we'll look at productively inefficient here in just a second. So Does the price equal the minimum ATC? Well, we can see right here that it does not. Okay, no, they're not producing at the lowest possible cost. They're going to produce here, charge up to there. Their lowest cost would actually be right over here, right? So they're producing even a little bit less than what would technically have them producing at the lowest possible cost. Okay, so are they allocatively efficient? No, we just looked at that on the last screen, right? They're going to produce where MR equals MC, where perfect competition may produce over here. All right, so price does not equal the MC. The price is greater, therefore they are underproducing. So, long story short, monopolies are not inefficient. Okay. So let's talk about a natural monopoly. Things like our electric company. I'll try to go through this fairly quick. You can replay it and go through it a couple times. This is where one firm can produce at the socially optimal quantity. In other words, they can provide the amount of electricity that society wants. Okay. So the reason that governments allow this to happen is because of economies of scale. Like I talked about before, me and Zach starting an electric company, we can't get in that business because it costs us billions of dollars to get it up and going, and then we're going to have to charge you a higher price. And the government's figured out that it's going to be better off, it's going to be cheaper for customers if they allow one company to do it and regulate that company so that they don't act like an unregulated monopoly. Okay? And so what we see is this situation here where they are technically not producing where MR equals MC, right? They're producing at the socially optimal quantity. And we'll talk more about that. That's a little bit confusing, but we'll circle back and talk more about natural monopolies. It's kind of a Unit 6 thing. Which now they said will not be on the exam, so I don't know how much they get into it, but I'll make sure that we clean that up enough that you guys understand. So let's take a quick look. Most economists argue that monopoly is inefficient because B, it produces too little output, as we saw on our graph, and it sets a price above the marginal cost. Okay. 2012, question number 21, within the range of market demand, which of the following is consistent with the conditions of a natural monopoly? Long run total cost decrease as output increases. Okay, we know that because the ATC is consistently dropping, and we also know that a monopoly does not produce into the inelastic range, which is following as a source of monopoly's power, or a term known as monopoly power. There's really one of these things right here that really ultimately gives a monopoly its power, and that is the ability or lack of ability for other businesses to enter into that particular product sourcing. Profit maximizing monopolist. Profit maximizing monopolist sets its output level at the elastic range of its demand curve. Remember, it will not produce in the inelastic range because when we get into the inelastic range, we know that the marginal revenue is actually negative. And a monopoly is just not going to produce if they're not making any money there. Okay. If the monopoly chooses to maximize total revenue, ooh, good question here. I love this question. If the monopolist chooses to maximize total revenue rather than total profit, it will choose which combination of price and output. Well, we know if it wanted to maximize profit, it would produce where MR equals MC, right? It would produce over here, but I'm sorry, it would produce right here, it would produce at Q1, but this question is not asking us if it would maximize profit. right? It says that it would maximize total revenue. Well, where do we know total revenue is at its maximum? It is when marginal revenue is positive, right? So this particular monopoly would produce at Q3 and charge, hold on, I got my lines mixed up here. Yeah, Q3, and it would charge P3, right? Because its total revenue is maximized at that point. All right, here we go. If the marginal cost curve of monopolist shifts up, which of the following will occur to a monopolist's price and output? So if their cost curve were to go up, marginal cost were to go up, well, they're still profit maximizing, right? So they are going to increase their price and decrease their output. The best way to do that would be to graph it out. Okay. And I don't have the ability to do that right here. Maybe in review one day we might go over that. But if you draw that out, or go back to the slide where we actually saw the cost increase, we'll see where that happens. And then finally here, from the point of view of economic efficiency, a monopolist produces too little of a good and charges too high of a price, which should just make sense for us. All right, I think this is the last question. Which of the following is necessarily true to a monopolist profit maximizing level of output? Profit maximizing level of output. Yeah, marginal revenue is equal to the marginal cost. MR equals MC. Okay. So yeah. No, maybe it's not the last question. Which of the following must be true for a firm that is a natural monopoly? It can produce and supply its product to an entire market at a lower cost than could a number of smaller firms. So a natural monopoly, remember now, a natural monopoly is a regulated monopoly allowed by the government, and the government's decided that that monopoly, i.e. Cobb EMC, should exist because it can produce and supply at a lower cost than if there were a bunch of us out there using up the resources. Assuming a linear downward sloping demand curve, as a monopoly sells additional units, marginal revenue will. That one should be pretty easy because we know that if our price is going down, then our marginal revenue should be decreasing continuously. If the monopolist is unregulated, its profit maximizing price and output level would lead to a deadweight loss area. And then you just have to go through, if it's unregulated, it's going to produce where MR equals MC, and it's going to charge up to this price here. And so that's going to leave us at RTV, deadweight loss. Now, if the government regulates it, it's going to cause them to produce over here, and will give us a price of P2, because the government has said we want you to produce this particular amount. All right. So I know that's quick. I know that's kind of going through it. Good news is you can replay it as many times as you want and look back through that stuff. I'll be on Monday. Well, I'll be on every day at 12. But I'd like for you guys to check in Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Write down some questions. We'll specifically go back through and talk about some of these in slow-mo. And yeah, we'll keep adjusting to this new way of learning until we either get back to school or graduate or whatever we do next. So good luck, everybody, and shoot me an email or something if you got any questions. If not, I will see you Monday.